go ahead and get started. Good afternoon to everyone out there who is tuned in to this special 12th episode of Sports Talk 757. I'm Claude Clark, the Executive Director of the Hampton Roads Sports Commission. At the Sports Commission and the Chamber, we've created a series here to highlight sports continuously around the region and to bring you athletes, sports administrators, former players who have had your great careers and who hold great roles in this community as it relates to sports. Before I begin, I also like to acknowledge our sponsors: Optima Health, Atlantic Bay Mortgage, CSKD Sports Medicine, Pepsi, Town Bank, and the Hampton Roads Chamber. Also, our municipal partners, City of Chesapeake, City of Norfolk, and the City of Virginia Beach, who have helped us to make this possible. Today, we have with us Larry Rubama, Senior Sports Writer at the Virginia-Pilot, Jami Frankenberry, Senior Sports Editor at the Virginia-Pilot, and just two gentlemen, two professionals who have been in this area for decades, writing sports stories and bringing to life these sports accolades and attributes of these personnel members that we all love and enjoy. Gentlemen, good afternoon and thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having us.
Most time we'd be in the office, in person, live at some sort of restaurant meeting, but we're home, virtual meeting in this fashion. But it's still great to have you guys. At this point, what are you guys kind of working on, and what's the projects at hand?
Well, we're trying to, keep it going. We do have some things going on. Some high schools have restarted. For the most part, most of Hampton Roads has shut down high school sports. Virginia Beach is plowing forward with high school sports, so we'll have some coverage of that. All the college basketball teams in the area, ODU, Norfolk State, Hampton, William & Mary, they're all playing. But most of those we're covering virtually. We've been to some of our reporters have been to a few games in person, but that's really been limited. And, we're like everybody else, we're adjusting, on the fly to this crazy, 10 or 11 months.
Larry, we've talked certainly about it, about things Jami has said. How has this posed challenges to convert to everything virtual and convert to doing business from home? And then, maybe what are some of the benefits of that?
I think I've talked to Jami many times about it. It's easy but it's easy to cover sports when things are going on. It's much more difficult to come up with story ideas. And so even though we haven't had much sports to write about this year, it's challenges you as a reporter to actually use your reporting skills to be able to find stories. And so that's one of the things that I've really enjoyed doing this year, coming up with different stories, about, Olympians who from our area, swimmers or track people who aren't able or find out that they might not even be able to chance. They've spent the last 4 years training for the Olympics and now that's gone. Or an athlete, a girl from Stanford who had a scholarship, was playing field hockey, and then they tell her, you know what, we're going to do away with the program. Or we've had a lot of the social justice issues that have come upon. We've dealt with athletes and their frustrations now of not having sports. How does it deal with them mentally? How does it deal with them physically? How's it dealing with depression? And then we've had the COVID cases. I've written 2 stories about family members that I've lost because of COVID, to let people know that this thing is real. I lost my grandmother last month. I lost my brother in the summertime, to talk about those issues. And then other stories just keep coming out. And I think as reporters, that's what we have to try to do, is make people want to come to the sports. Yeah, there's no sports going on per se, but find those stories that will make people interested, to make it realize that sports goes on even when it's not being played. And that's one of the things that I think has really challenged all of us as reporters, is to find those stories. And there's just, it seems like it's almost every month there's something else that pops up. And then once you get it going, after a while, people end up calling you and say, hey, I got this idea, or I got this idea. So I tell you, I've been a reporter for almost 30 years. This is probably one of the most challenging, but probably one of the most satisfying years of being a reporter, because it's made me become a reporter, find stories. It's easy to write. If you got a game coming up, you're writing a preview, you're covering the game, you're writing a feature story. That's there because the sports are going on. But now there's no sports going on. Now there is now, but back then from March to the summertime, there were no sports going on. So now you got to go out and try to find story ideas. And it was challenging, but I enjoyed it as well.
You mentioned the length of your career, over 20, 30 years of writing. I wanted to ask you guys, we see your names in the paper, and we see you previewing sports. We see you kind of battling on who's predicting the wins and losses. So we enjoy this kind of banter back and forth between you guys. But how'd you get your respective starts? Larry, if you want to go first, and Jamie, you can go. How'd you start off in sports journalism, and how'd you go from there?
Well, I wrote a story about it back in July when I started writing columns. But what actually happened is I wanted to be you, Claudette. I wanted to be a professional baseball player growing up as a kid. And as I tell kids when I go to talk to them, you see me now, you see I didn't make it. And I mean, I really, truly believed I was going to be a professional baseball player. And I was an 8th grader when a woman came to my church to talk about career goals. Her name was Dorothy Gilliam. She was a columnist, the first Black female reporter at the Washington Post. And she came to our school. I didn't know it at the time, but she says, if you can't play the sport, why not write about it? I was in the 8th grade. And that seed was sowed back then and made it to where I am. So I ended up giving up baseball like a couple of years later, realizing I wasn't good enough. I ran track, got a track scholarship, and then went to Ohio University, which was one of the best schools in the country for journalism, and then just kind of got into my career that way. But I always loved sports, so I combined sports, and English was the only subject I cared about in school. So I combined the two and was fortunately and blessed to be able to make a career out of it.
Yeah. For me, it's, my career is maybe not as inspired as Larry's, although it sort of started the same way. I couldn't hit a curveball back in the day, so that ended my baseball career way earlier than I would have liked. But no, I went to Old Dominion in the 90s and really had no clue what I was going to be doing for a career. I was an English major, and I kind of stumbled into the Mason Crown, which was the student newspaper. And they needed somebody to cover a soccer game, and I probably wrote the worst soccer game story in the history of soccer game stories back in 1993. But I really liked it. A guy named Fred Kirsch, who was working at the Pilot, was our writing coach, and he really encouraged me. And I actually started working part-time at the Pilot for a little while, just answering phones and trying to do whatever I could. Got a lot of experience that way. Ended up being hired full-time back at my hometown paper up in Winchester for a couple of years before I came back to the Pilot as a full-time writer in 2000.
So as you've gone through writing coaches and obtained these different degrees and professionally developed, how do you guys stay so motivated? That's something I always wanted to know. We see a great story about Larry or Jamie and Larry come together and preview a certain sport, and then we go on about our business and we come back. There's still great stories on a daily basis, on a weekly basis. How do you guys just stay so motivated to write at such a high level on a regular basis? We ask this to athletes, and they say, hey, look, they love the game, or if they love their family, or if they love a competition. How do you guys write on that level daily?
For me, it's a passion. I mean, as I said, I love sports, and I wouldn't want to. When I got into journalism, I got jobs offered to cover the courthouse. I got jobs to cover education, the police beat. None of them seemed anything I wanted. I wanted to be a sports reporter. And I think just the love, being a former athlete, it keeps you, I think, still plugged into the sport. And so that passion. And then as I said on my Twitter account, I know every athlete has a story. And even if they might not be a star, but they might just be somebody who's going on. And so everybody has a story. And I feel that God has blessed me to be able to tell these people's stories, whether it be a tragic situation, a successful situation. That's what gives me the inspiration to keep going each week. Like you said, sometimes as Jamie can tell you, you're exhausted. You're like, oh my gosh, I can't write another story. But the thing is the story you just wrote last week, they forgot about that. Now they want to see something else. So that keeps you on your, like baseball. You might have a good game, you hit 5 for 5. Next game you can't come out over 5. You got to keep it going. So it's that almost like that kind of pressure you put in yourself to want to be able to hit that home run every time you come up. I swing and miss a whole lot, but I try to make sure at least I stay above the 300 line. But
that's not, Larry doesn't swing and miss much at all. But yeah, I mean, it really is, one of the motivating factors is, your name is on that, that byline every day in the newspaper. So you want to be true to that and make sure people read it and respect it. And like Larry said, you want to be respectful to the athletes you're covering. You don't want to take a day off, and because for many of them, some of them, this is their chance to be in the newspaper or on the web or on Twitter or wherever we highlight them. So you want to kind of make sure you're being true to that and respecting them too.
And that's a good point. I just want to add on what Jamie said, because there's athletes that I've covered, 20 years ago, who say, "Man, you wrote that story about me. I'll never forget it. I still keep it." So you want to make sure you get the name spelled right, you get the facts spelled right, because if that's something they're going to keep, if you jacked it up, that's their history that you jacked up. So you'll make sure you try to do the best you can to deliver it the best way you can, because that's something that they're going to keep and something they're going to remember forever, and their family members as well.
Well, to Jamie's point about the curveballs, you're not the only one. That's why I switched over to being a pitcher.
I didn't think of that. I should have thought of that.
So, I got to make you feel a little bit better on that one. But no, that's great. We just talk about and get a chance to interview persons in so many different professions, and they talk about passion. They talk about the love for what they do. And then as we approach young people as coaches and professionals, we tell them that you have to be passionate about what you're doing. So that's just another story and another example of how we have heard from so many, accomplished professionals on that passion they have for what they do and having that on a daily basis. At this point, you have this coverage schedule and you cover so many stories, but what is your coverage area? Oftentimes people say, do you go to North Carolina? Do you go to Northern Virginia? Or is it just the Tidewater area? What is your jurisdiction, as they say, on writing and your coverage?
Well, the Pilot and Daily Press have merged over the last couple of years. So we've really become one sports staff. And the Pilot basically covers the, 7 cities of Southampton Roads, Chesapeake, Norfolk, Virginia Beach, Suffolk, Portsmouth. And then the Daily Press has the Peninsula, all the way up to Williamsburg, Gloucester, up to that area, Newport News and Hampton, of course. So we've really, really tried to be hyper local and not extend ourselves too much as our staff has changed. We want to try to keep it as tightly, knit as we can, because there's so many stories, so many athletes out there. We just want to try to, focus our coverage on those areas as much as we can.
And not easy either, because you're covering, we have a much smaller staff now and trying to cover all that. And then that's, you think about the high schools, then you got the colleges as well. I mean, so it's a lot. And then you got the little niche things that go on. So trying to keep on top of everything. If people only knew how much we had to cover and how few people we have, they would be amazed to see what we're able to put out each day.
So to that point, and with that thought, how do you see the future of sports journalism? We've seen the Pilot and Daily Press, newspapers and organizations getting smaller and covering less area and doing less, but sports don't stop and sports expand and more sports come onto the map and people want to be covered. So how does that kind of work? And, where do you see the future of this going with sports expanding and your resources for covering these sports kind of contracting? How does that kind of play out in your mind?
Well, we, as an editor, we really had to make difficult choices, choices that, we would love to go to every high school football game in Hampton Roads. We'd love to go to every college basketball game, but we just can't. So we really have to kind of pick and choose our spots. We kind of pick the best story, the best game, focus on that, and try to write about that. But, we are spread thin and thinner than we've ever been. So it's kind of, it's just about making difficult choices and figuring out, what appeals to the most readers, whether it's a good human interest story, whether it's a big game, Oscar Smith or Ocean Lakes or something like that. We try to hit as many as we can. But yeah, at the end of the day, we just make choices that we kind of feel like are going to be best for our readership. And, as far as the future, who knows? I mean, we've seen so many changes over these last couple of years. Hopefully we've settled into now where we're really, with the Daily Press and us kind of combining forces, hopefully we've settled into a groove a little bit and covering, more than we've ever covered with fewer people than we've ever had. So yeah, it's tough though.
And then the other input as well is the whole online thing. I mean, before, 10 years ago, we couldn't even, the TV would be able to get stuff, but now we're able to put stories on immediately, which has changed everything. Before we had to wait till that evening for the next day's paper for stuff to be in. Now we're able to get on just like the TV stations, even before the TV stations now. And so, I mean, we try to make us the place to go to. If you want to know what's going on in sports, we want to be the place you go. Come to the Daily Press or the Virginian-Pilot. And it's a lot more work because deadlines are different now. And but we're trying to make it as fresh and as breaking as possible.
Yeah, so we'll call it the C word, COVID-19, and we've seen a number of articles by both of you all in the paper and how that's affected sports. Even one from Larry, as we saw empty stands, and this is the first time in so many years that we've not had Friday night football, and so forth and so on. How did it feel to you guys to hear of that news of winter sports being canceled last year, and then again this year, and all the comments and emails that you've gotten about that? How has that affected you guys as sports writers personally?
I know for me, being a former athlete, it was tough. And I wrote that one column because I wanted fans to know. Then we thought we might have at least winter sports until that was canceled. But you try to let people realize what it feels like to be an athlete who kind of your whole purpose and identity is being around sports, and to have that taken away with no warning, just to know you're done, you're not going to play. So it started with the spring sports, with the baseball players and the softball players and soccer and track and field, thinking, especially being a senior, and you realize your senior year is gone. And so every time I try to write a story, I try to make myself really think about that. And I hear from people who don't know anything about sports who want to say, well, what about the other students? I said, well, I can't speak for the other students. If you're reading me, you're reading in the sports page. So you have to hear from my point of view. If you don't want to hear my point of view, you can go to the other paper. The other part of the paper. But it's real. But I try to tell them, I said, if you've never played sports, you can never understand what I'm talking about or what these athletes are going through. And it's some of the athletes they talk about the depression that they're going through, the anxiety, especially the ones who hope that they want to go get a scholarship, and now that's could be taken away. And so there's a lot of frustration that's going on. And so when I heard that winter sports was canceled last week, except for in Virginia Beach and certain parts of the peninsula, I feel for those kids, because some of these kids, this is the only thing that brings them to even want to come to school is sports, and now they're done with that. And so I can't imagine what they're going through to get up, and you're not even going to school. You're looking at a virtual classroom. How difficult must that be? And so I've tried to write that in every story that I've written about just the frustration they must be feeling, and to try to give those people who aren't fans or sports people realize just what these athletes are going through. It's got to be tough. I can't imagine.
Yeah, there were some senior athletes who, one of the best things about being a senior athlete is running out onto that field, when you're a senior or senior night. And a lot of athletes didn't get that, and that was really a shame. And, I think when this all started, last March, we kind of felt like it'll just take a week or two. We'll be back to business pretty soon. But man, it's just, the devastation has been unbelievable. And like selfishly, like Larry and I have been to a high school football game probably almost every Friday night for the last 20, 30 years. And like this was last fall was the first time we didn't do that. Larry and I like to go hang out and watch a little bit of football on Friday nights, and we didn't get to do that in the fall. So selfishly, that was really disappointing. And from a business standpoint, one of the biggest needle movers on our website is high school football, Old Dominion football, all the college football that we've had, that really has been the bread and butter of our coverage. We just have not had that. And so that was really, really devastating for us. And that forced us, to look for other stories and try to find different ways, to kind of keep sports in the paper. And I think we did that. It wasn't easy, but, we went off the beaten path a little bit. Probably wrote some stories we wouldn't normally have written. Right. Some athletes who, we maybe wouldn't have written about, because, a lot of sports writing is, just like an athlete, you're in a routine, you're like an athlete goes to practice and plays games. Well, just like a sports writer, he's covering the week leading up to the game, covering the game. There's just a lot of routine, and that went out the window. So that was really a challenge for a lot of our reporters over the last 10 or 11 months.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, something that you mentioned that people don't realize. They're thinking you're just covering sports, or you're just writing about the sports or recapping. But as you mentioned, you're used to going to these games on Friday nights. You're used to coming together and making previews and recaps. So this is something that's been taken away from you. We just think about the athletes or the coaches or the teams, which is certainly devastating. But these are things that you love to do, as we've mentioned a number of times. So those are great answers and great insight on how this has really affected you guys, going forward. With that said, at this time, obviously you have to prepare because you don't know when schools will stop and start. You don't know when waves of this virus will come and go. So at this point, what would you have been previewing? And, what sports would you be covering right now? And, what sports would you guys be kind of taking a tally on who's up and who's down as it relates to wins and losses? Where would we be in the calendar right now?
So this is January. We'll be right in the middle of the beginning of basketball. Some of the district games will be getting played. We were just finished playing some of the really big Christmas tournaments. We had at least one team that was going to be nationally ranked this year. Kings Fork High School boys team was going to be playing in some really major, tournaments, and that's gone. And right now we'll be kind of falling into place of getting ready for the district games. And Tuesday night and Friday night we're going to be the big games with everybody. And then you got some of the wrestling matches that have been going on. Some of the track is still going on, but some track meets that are going on and swimming. And so that would have been right in that right now in January. And then building up to February, and then of course March will be the playoff time. And now, like I said, we have very few teams playing right now.
Yeah, right now Virginia Beach, I think they started practice last week, but for the most part, there are some smaller districts that are playing basketball up on in the Bay Rivers. I think York County, up that way, but in Southampton Roads, almost everybody from Norfolk, Portsmouth. The only, I think the Beach District with 10 teams, they're going to play basketball among themselves. They're going to play each other. They're going to try to put together a season. But for the most part, I'm not sure exactly how many basketball teams statewide are playing, but it's a fraction of what, there are some, I think they're going to try to put together a state tournament in basketball, but who knows what that's going to look like.
Yeah. And then if you do well, say you win that tournament, everybody's gonna say, well, it was watered down. It wasn't a real tournament. You put an asterisk next to it, Yeah,
50% participation.
Right. And then the risk still, what if Virginia Beach is playing right now? What if the numbers start to go up? Or what if somebody gets sick? Or what if, the what if is still gonna be there? And so as the athletes, I hope they realize, the ones that are playing right now in Virginia Beach, I hope they're being careful because, one mistake can affect the whole season, and then that season's done as well. So it's risky. It's really risky.
This has even affected our show. Larry and Jamie, when we talked about this a month or so ago, we said, hey, look, let's do this special episode on Monday because this is preview day of sorts for you guys. And, you have some information coming out on a Monday at noon, and we wanted to kind of capture that. Tell us a little bit more about what you guys do on Mondays and how that works as it relates to previewing sports.
Well, Larry will know this. I will send out an email to all the reporters like, what do you got for me this week? I got to know what's coming up just because I'm planning the week, with we have 5 full-time sports writers, a couple of part-timers. So, we like Monday to and Greg Geeson's our assistant editor who runs our high school stuff and coverage, assigning anyway. And he does quite a bit of writing also. So, Monday's all kind of about being prepared for the rest of the week and kind of spacing out what stories we're going to have, what's going to be on the website, what's coming when, and that sort of thing. So Mondays are pretty busy for me, just kind of planning out, what the rest of the week's going to look like.
And then for us as the reporters, Monday when I meet with Greg, he wants to know what do you got coming? So you better be prepared of what you got coming. You can't just say, well, I don't know. No, because they got to plan ahead. And so that's one of the things, again, as being a reporter, you have to start, you can't plan on Sunday night or Monday what you're going to have for the week. You got to be thinking the week before that, what do I have that's going to come? And then you hope that you can get those stories done. We don't know what's going to happen, but usually if we didn't have the COVID situation, we would be doing our top 10 rankings or top 15 rankings. We'd be doing a notebook. We would be doing, what's happened in the past week in wrestling and boys and girls basketball. And we'd be doing stats, and it's busy. So from Monday to Saturday, you're busy, doing something every single day. And it's weird because it's gone. And so I wonder what's going to be like when I actually get back into that swing again. I wonder if I'm going to be off. But I still, I know what to do. Well, I know what to do in terms of getting everything together. But so it is. It's a weird situation right now. I mean, even though we have Virginia Beach playing, we had our previews run last week for the Virginia Beach. For boys basketball and girls basketball, but everything else is obsolete because the only thing people that are playing was some of the Bay Rivers and Virginia Beach. So the previews are kind of like they ran and they're done. And I feel so bad. So I talked to several different parents that said, I'm glad you guys still put the preview out, but it's kind of like rankings. You can't even do rankings because you're only playing with a few teams. And so again, you really feel for these athletes and coaches, everybody, coaches, people who the trainers, everybody who's usually involved and know what's going on each day. And now they're kind of like, we don't know what's going to happen. And now we're wondering if we're going to even have our fall sports coming up next month.
Yeah, one reason we ran those previews, even though not everybody was participating, just sort of felt like it was, and Greg, made that decision in consultation with Larry and his team. So many athletes aren't getting their season, but it was kind of a nod to them, like, hey, we're going to get these kids and these athletes' names in the paper as kind of acknowledging, hey, here are the athletes we were looking forward to seeing, and the team. That's why we did that over the last week. I think wrestling appeared today, and then basketball and the other winter sports appeared over the weekend or last week.
And it gives them something. I mean, we did the same thing in the spring. We didn't have any spring sports, but we ran those previews as well. But like, as Jamie said, it gives the athletes at least something. I hope it doesn't make them feel more angry because, like, man, we ran this thing. We don't even get to compete. But at least it was something to make them realize we do care, and we feel for them. We definitely feel for them.
If I had a say or a vote or some advice, I would say certainly that was meaningful, and that means a lot to so many people, playing or not playing, seasons or no seasons. When they see their name in the paper or just that little small box of ink from you guys, it certainly means a lot. Smaller athlete, larger athlete, big school, small school, regardless of pitcher or no pitcher, front page, back page, it certainly meant a lot. And I can personally say as a player, coach, mentor of some of these young athletes, and I'm sure many more agree, we're certainly appreciative of you guys taking that time, whether it's one line or a front page cover story, to continue with it. I'll certainly say one of the words you mentioned was our ranking. And I'm sure you get plenty of phone calls and emails about how you rank or don't rank, or 1 through 10 or 1 through 20, or who chose that. Larry, I'm sure you said it's Jamie's fault or vice versa. But take us, help us to drill down a little further into how you rank teams. You have a Great Bridge or an Oscar Smith or a Lansdowne or a Kellum or basketball or football. How do you get a 1 through 15 in these male and female sports?
Well, I write down a school's name in a piece of paper, and then I put it in a bag and I shake it up. And look, that's what some people think I do. They think nothing. It's funny because most of the complaints I get from people about the rankings, they don't know anything about any other district but the district that they're in. So that's all they know. They don't know anything about what the Eastern does, what the Southeastern does, what the Peninsula does, what Bay Rivers does. They just know about their district, and they don't even really know their district that well. But it goes into, a lot goes into talking to the coaches about what kind of players they have, at least the preseason rankings. You see who's coming back, what they did last year, as well as any new players they may have received. Transfers and all that kind of stuff that goes on. And then as the season goes on, you kind of look at their schedule, who they play, and then you look at who they play. And so it becomes each week you try to just get a fair idea. You have some teams that they play nobody for 18 games, but they want to be number one. Well, they haven't played anybody good. They haven't challenged them. And that happens every season. I'll have a team that's maybe 17-1, but they haven't played anybody outside of their district or any of the top teams. So, you look at the tournaments that are being played, you look at the strength of schedule, you look at, wins and losses. Some schools, if they go out of town and play a really, really tough schedule and they lose 3 games, I'm not going to drop them 3 spots because those teams they played were either nationally ranked teams or regionally ranked teams or teams from outside the state. So a lot goes into it. People, they, like I said, they probably think I just write down a name and just pull it out the hat, or they say I got favoritism towards certain districts. Believe me, it's none of that. If I didn't have to do rankings, I wouldn't even do them. No, I'm just joking. Rankings are great though because it gets people excited about, man, my team's ranked number 10, and then they play a team like number 2 and they upset them. See, we should be ranked, and then you rank them high. Oh, here's something real funny. Coaches complain the whole year about being ranked low. Then when you rank them number 1, 2, or 3, then they don't want to be ranked. Don't rank us high. Don't rank us that high.
Right.
So same thing when Jamie and I picked the games on during football season. They don't want to be the team. They want us to pick against them so they can use that as motivation to their players. So you just try to do the best you can. We don't try to go out and try to demean any team. We're trying to give every team the proper respect that they get. And sometimes if I see a team who beats a team that's ranked real high, I try to jump them as high as I can for that little moment. And then I like to see it, when the coaches try to call and say, well, how come you didn't rank us? I said, well, I did. You guys lost the next game, so you dropped out. But it's just a way to be able to get the players excited, the fans excited, and the coaches excited, even though they won't admit it.
Yeah, I mean, there is that passion, that's why we do it. It can be a pain. Larry and I have talked about, man, why are we doing this? Why are we picking, between Oscar Smith or Ocean Lakes or ranking the top 10? But I always tell people, for rankings, it's not an exact science. Like you said, there are so many factors, there's so many factors. And at the end of the day, Larry's going to pick the top 10 that it's his top 10, I mean, he's going to do his best. He's going to do his research. He's going to see the teams and players and talk to the coaches, but it's really not an exact science, and that's kind of what makes it fun.
Yeah.
It certainly means a lot, though. And again, as an observer, as a person who purchases the paper still, and, this stuff means a lot to coaching, player. Went to Great Bridge my own self. We were ranked at times, we're unranked at times. And it does mean a lot. So I'm sure you get very spirited phone calls and emails, but continue with that as well. It means a lot. It means a lot to the players. And, just us as athletes and coaches, former athlete, coach, you just need something to argue about. You need something to work towards. You need something to, motivate your team. And, it's a competition-based thing. So, you want to be first or work your way up from 10th or rebuild your team. So, certainly good. Another thing that you guys do really well is to highlight star athletes and star coaches. And you see these all Tidewater players of the year and all Tidewater team, first and second team, which really means a lot. And you talk about where the student athlete is going to college and where they might have offers from. Tell us a little bit more about, how that came about. And, how you guys rank that and ultimately pick the top players in each of these categories.
Yeah, the Pilot's been doing all Tidewater for years. They started in football, and Larry may know the year because he's got
1935.
Yeah, it's been forever. I think for the most part, the rest of the sports, I think we started picking all Tidewater maybe in the late 80s or 90s.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Range.
Yeah.
And we pick them for all team sports. But football, obviously is the big one. That's the one that because football is really a group effort, because we don't have one person covering football. We all watch football, go to football, and cover football. So that one is a little more complicated just because there are a lot more voices. And, we'll order a couple of pizzas, go into a conference room, and 2 hours later we have an all-time player of the year and first and second team. And we've had some spirited about that. As far as the other sports, we usually have one beat writer, like Larry's the basketball beat writer. So he'll usually pick the all Tidewater team in consultation with coaches. He'll look at the all district teams. And of course a lot of other, a lot of athletes throughout the year. But yeah, that if you pick 12 athletes for the all Tidewater first and second basketball team, there's always a 13th and 14th athlete that really deserve to be on there. But you got to make that choice. You got to cut the list off somewhere. So there are a lot of deserving athletes, but that's one thing that makes it so good is the competitiveness in Hampton Roads. In all sports, is really a fertile area for recruiting in just about every sport in Hampton Roads. So yeah, that's fun. It a little bit of angst. There have been some disagreements over the years, right, Larry? But
yeah,
for the most part, we have fun with it. And that, I think, there have maybe only been 2 times we did not pick an all Tidewater football team. I think once may have been during World War I or World War II or something. And the other time was last year because of COVID, because they didn't have a football season.
Wow.
Yeah.
Man, that's hard to believe, man.
So with that said, we always try to have an educational component to this and you never know who's listening. And with each show, person said, well, how did this person get to be a referee or a writer or a professional athlete? What advice do you guys give to youth, persons in college, persons who are interning for you, who want to become successful sports writers? We talked about all the rankings and things you guys done successfully writing at such a high level, and certainly praised and observed you guys for that. But people who are looking in, again, trying to intern, trying to grow to your level, where should they start, and what advice do you give to them?
Know how to write. It never failed. I speak to a lot of different high school classes each year, and I tell the kids, if you really want to be a sports writer, come follow me, come shadow me for a day, and I'll take you and see what I do. And they are amazed, because the first thing you talk to a lot of people who want to be sports reporters, the first thing they say they want to do is they want to be on ESPN. And you have to make them realize that's not going to happen, at least not for a while. You got to be able to learn how to write. And some of the people that have shadowed me didn't really invest in writing. They know sports, but they know basketball and football. They don't know baseball. They don't know wrestling. They don't know field hockey. And I tell them that you got to be a jack of all trades. You got to be able to know all the sports, not just the ones that are the popular sports. But the other thing is just get to know people. Learn how to listen. Learn how to have people skills to be able to pick up on story ideas all the time. It's not just about knowing the sports. And you just got to continue to read. I like to read many different people. One of the ones when it came to writing about baseball was a writer by the name of Bob Nightingale. And I used to see how he used to take different angles in terms of how to, because I covered, I think I told you, I covered Michael Kadire his first year in Fort Wayne, Indiana. So if you're covering 130 something baseball games, you can't write the same story all the time. So you're always trying to think of other ways to be able to bring in human interest to the story, or just something. It's got to be something different, because the same story gets old. And I think that the advice is to definitely know your sports, but also learn how to write well, learn to get on your school newspaper. Whenever you get a chance to write, be able to write. And then if you get a chance to follow somebody who's actually in this business. Kids are surprised when I go to a game and the game ends and I say, hey, look, I can't talk to you right now. I got 20 minutes to write this story. That's quotes, stats, and a story. And they're like, what? You don't write it in the morning time? I said, I wish I did. I got to write the story in 20 minutes and sometimes less than that. And I think for them to be able to see it, it'll make them realize, do I really want to deal with this? And you talk about the stress when you're in there. It's like being in a game, preparing for an event in track and field or any event. The excitement that you have, it takes you a while to come down from it. When I write a story on a Friday night, it's probably like 1 o'clock, so I can find my body's like restful and I can go to sleep, because you're just so hyped up from everything that you got. And then you realize that next morning, everybody's reading you. So you better make sure your stuff is correct. But the main thing is know how to write and make sure you know not just about the main sports, but know about all sports, have people skills, and also be able to be inquisitive, try to find different angles to stories is what I would say.
David, we talked about with you, the editing, the planning, the organizing of all these things, from the editorial standpoint, what advice do you have to give? Because as I've gotten to know both of you all and know your position, Jamie, it's much more than writing. It's much more than just covering a story. You have to organize these things and put all this into motion. So what advice do you give from your vantage point?
Yeah, Larry gave some great advice. I agree with that. I mean, I always felt like if you could write, you could do almost anything, And 20 years ago, you could have only written and you would have been fine in this business. But now it's about organization. And to me, it's really about versatility. Because you can't just write a story. You're out, you're tweeting, you're taking video. You have to have interview skills, and for me, organization's really key, because there's so many things going on. With 5 writers, so organization is really, you can't be sort of flippant about, in this job. And I'll tell you, one reason why is because if you overlook something or forget something, you're going to get a phone call from a coach or an athlete or, parent or AD, somebody who says, hey, you forgot us, what's up with that? You really have to, want to make sure you're prepared. And that's, I think, been the biggest skill for me, is just being prepared and organized and being able to look ahead and plan, to know what's coming up.
Again, that's a major component of ours. We want to bring these stories to life, but we also want to educate and help ones coming behind us on their journey into certain professions. As we kind of come to a close, we want to have some, last shots from you guys in the last question or so. Larry, we can start with you. What are some of the most memorable moments that you've had in this area covering sports, or some of the things that have stood out to you the most?
This area, well, as everybody talks, Percy Harvin, whether he was on the basketball court, the football field, or on the track, I've seen a lot of great athletes, and he was by far one of the greatest athletes I've ever seen. Just spectacular, and what he was able to do, covering Chris Beatty when he was here, all the Lance Town and Salem, what he did in terms of changing the area, in terms of the way football was played. I think back to, I interviewed him a couple weeks ago, Lonnie Blow, when they won the state championship, following that team and seeing where those kids went on to. He's got a kid at Wall Street. He's got a kid who, is a professor. He's just got it's not just about the sports, but after sports, what he's been able to do. Covering LaShawn Merritt was a great thing. Seeing him from when he was a 10th grader to now, being I forgot how many medals he's won. And we got so many other athletes who have come through here, with all the baseball players, David Wright. I remember, talking to him, and who would ever thought he'd have been the face of the New York Mets. But as Jamie will tell you, athlete after athlete after athlete who has come through here. It's amazing. And I feel privileged to be able to cover this area because now when you talk to other people, they know about the 757, and to know that they read our stuff, it makes you feel good to know that they're hearing about those athletes because of what we do.
Yeah, one thing that I've always said is the best part of being at the Pilot has been sort of all these athletes that have grown up and become superstars. Like, we wrote about them first. We introduced everybody to Percy Harvin. We introduced everybody to David Wright and Michael Kadire. Larry was probably the first interview for LaShawn Merritt, before he became an Olympian. And after he became an Olympian, Larry was the one who was interviewing him, So I've always felt like that's been a big, blessing for us to be able to, see these, I remember covering Justin Upton, that season when he was a senior at Great Bridge, and you had 25 scouts lined up in the bleachers, and he was going to be the #1 pick, and it was amazing. That he could hit a curveball, by the way. He could hit. But yeah, he's a guy that comes to mind. I remember going to almost every game. I felt like I was a Justin Upton beat writer, just because he was such a dynamic star and so well known across the country, but we got to tell those stories before anybody else. I agree with Larry, like Percy Harvin was the most electric athlete I've ever seen. Guy like Kevin Whaley comes to mind. He was a great running back, but Percy, just in every season, from basketball, especially football and track, he just was something to watch. And, it was an event. When Percy performed, whether you liked him or hated him, and there were a lot of people who didn't like him, just because they just sort of felt like, whether it was his attitude or whatever, I think it was kind of, I'm not so sure that was justified in a lot of cases. But when he had a football game Friday night, man, it was fun. It was electric being in that stadium and watching him perform.
Yeah, speaking of all that, we have Chris Beatty, who's going to be on our show next. On the 28th, and I'm certainly sure he's
basketball on grass. That was his. When he came here. Yeah, he had some great teams.
We're going to certainly love having him on the show. Guys, I just can't thank you guys enough. We talked about. I don't even know how you had time to do this show. All the stuff that you guys have to do, plan for, and then deadlines you have to meet. That you're probably loving on each other. Jamie on Larry, and then Larry, you're pushing the deadlines back. But, we certainly appreciate this time, and certainly value and thank you for the work that you do, because those one-liners, those photos, those, sports editorials online, in the print, those mean a lot to a lot of athletes, and I'll speak for them because that's just, you can't feel any better about that after, giving your best and working hard in off season and during the season, and to have that recapped and somebody recognize it, not just for that recognition, so your family can understand that. And so college coaches can see it, or whoever looks at it. That certainly means a lot. So I'm personally thanking you guys for what it is that you guys do. Getting home 1, 2 o'clock in the afternoon or in the morning, still trying to have a family, still trying to, go on with a personal life. Those are very demanding days, very demanding schedules for you guys. So as the Sports Commission, we certainly appreciate that. And know your great writing and editorial skills will continue. So we look forward to all of that. And, Larry, you're talking about knowing sports. That's why he's on our board over here at the Sports Commission. We need to have people who know sports. So, Larry, Jami, we certainly appreciate you guys, salute you guys, and wish you the best as you guys try to kind of pivot to the positive, as we say here in the chamber, and, come up with creative ways to kind of continue to work through this pandemic.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Claudio. Thanks for having us.
No problem. Thanks to all of you who joined us today on this very special episode of Sports Talk 757. We also want to thank our sponsors once again: Optima Health, Atlantic Bay Mortgage, CHKD Sports Medicine, Pepsi and Town Bank, City of Virginia Beach, City of Chesapeake, and City of Norfolk. To all of you listening, please mark your calendars for January 28th, as we have coaching legend, or high school coaching legend, Chris Beatty from Lansdowne originally, and now is the assistant coach at the University of Pittsburgh, working with the receivers up there, doing a tremendous job of recruiting. We're excited to have him. For more information on the Sports Commission, visit hamptonroads.org, and we can see this episode or previous episodes on our YouTube page at Hampton Roads Sports Commission. Guys, thank you. Please stay safe. Our attendees, thank you, and please stay safe. Guys, have a good afternoon.
You do. Thank you.